Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second webinar in our series. My name is Natalie Kapellik-Nixon, and I am the Director for Youth and Young Adult Ministries for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA. However, that is not my primary purpose for being here this evening. I also serve as the chair for the Orthodox Youth Directors in North America, and that is who your hosts are this evening. Now, you might be wondering who we are. A lot of people aren't quite sure who we are yet, so let me give you a little bit about us. The Orthodox Youth Directors in North America are a working committee of individuals who serve as the departmental heads of youth, college, and young adult ministry for the different Orthodox churches represented in the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of the United States. So there are 9 of us that serve together on the committee, and what we hope to do is bring resources and articulate a common understanding for youth ministry to promote Orthodox Christian youth formation. Our hope is we partner with all Orthodox youth workers, helping them to more effectively bring youth to Christ in his church. So one of our ways of doing that is offering these webinars. With us tonight, we have Melissa Tsongranis. Melissa is the Associate Director for the Center for Family Care for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, where she has worked since 2001. Prior to her work at the Archdiocese, Melissa worked for 10 years as a developmental specialist for an early intervention program, which worked with families with children from birth to 3 years old who had special needs. Melissa received her bachelor's degree from Sacramento State University in California in child development with an emphasis in family education and an additional 2 years of studies for a credential in early childhood special education. Melissa currently lives in Tarpon Springs, Florida with her lovely husband, George, and their adorable son, Nomikos. And we are very excited and honored to have her join us tonight on our topic of parents, the missing piece of your youth ministry. So Melissa, thank you for joining us tonight and welcome. And I am going to take myself away so everyone can focus on you. Thank you. And just to note right now, if you have questions for Melissa, you can use either the chat feature or along the bottom, you will see a button for question and answer. So please go ahead and feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure that they get to Melissa. All right, thank you. And Melissa, I'm going to hand it over to
ministry is doing. And as we begin, I have a little bit of a confession with regard to that. When I was in my 20s, and at that time, I felt like I knew everything, and now I knew nothing. It's not the same for everybody in their 20s. It was just me. But I really thought I was very involved in camping ministries in the Orthodox Church. And I really was excited about that ministry and working as a counselor and in administration in that ministry and stuff. And I really, even though I wouldn't have said it out loud, I really felt like I was this important priest that was bringing this young person to Christ. And that, we got them for, 1 week away from their, environment, where we could really, immerse them in the church and everything. And I still believe that's a really good thing. But I was a little bit warped in my thinking and thinking that, because in some cases, I actually thought that the parents were getting in the way of children's spiritual development, because the parents, maybe the families weren't going to church, or maybe they weren't really that into the church, and they just, went through the motions and stuff. And so I had this thing of thinking, well, gosh, if it wasn't for their families and parents, we'd do all this work at camp. And, in my lack of humility and my blown up ego at the time, thought, well, I'm doing all this stuff and everything. And so as in that stage, I really had that broken vision of what parent ministry was, and kind of felt that they weren't really necessary to ministry. And then I got involved in early intervention, and I really learned what parenting, working with parents was about, and how important parents were. And so what I kind of want us to focus on, and to consider a few things as we're progressing this evening. The first is that God, and I don't think any of us would disagree with this, God is the absolute most important person involved in the child's life. And he's actively working in every child in our ministry's life. Sometimes, despite our ministry, we maybe think we're offering the best, but thank God that God is there, redirecting us, working with the hearts of our young people, and so we have to recognize that he is the most important person in the child's life, in the ministry, and our job is merely to constantly be turning the child back towards. Second thing that's really important for us to consider, and to acknowledge, is that God is actively working in that child's family's life as well, whether or not they recognize it, whether or not they show up at church just occasionally, or they're very actively involved in a lot of frantic energy in the church and stuff, and constantly there and not. What we need to recognize is that God has placed this child in their family for their salvation, as well as for the salvation of the other family members. So God has chosen this family for this child, okay? So we need to recognize that our ministry to children has to include their family as well. And then the last thing that I want us to really consider, and I think it's just a really good place to kind of, is to realize, to shift from the I'm doing ministry to that God has really granted us the privilege to be in the life of this child and their family, not for their salvation, but for our own salvation. And I think when we do ministry from the basis of the fact that God is working in our life, and he is eternity, it no longer becomes about us. And that's really important, especially when we're working with families, because how my family operates and how your family may operate may be very differently. And it's very important that we acknowledge those differences, and we support families where they are in their development and how they choose to live their family life and stuff. So as I grew, what I became to know for sure, what I know for sure, is that I know very little. And what I know for sure kind of comes from our church and from the Bible. And what I want to focus on right now is what I know for sure is from Deuteronomy 6:5-9. And it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on the gates." Okay? I just think that's a very beautiful, beautiful and compelling passage. And I think what, as youth workers, we need to realize is all those places are in the home. It doesn't say, walk on the way to Sunday school, or, talk about them as you're in Goya or catechism program or summer camp or any other youth program we can dream up. It just talks about just being embraced, talks about being filled with the love of God in your home, so that you're constantly surrounded by that and teaching your children and living that in your home. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with these programs, our Sunday school programs, our Goya, our Soya teen programs, and summer camps. I really think highly of them. But we have to recognize that the real work is meant to happen in the homes. And as youth ministers, we need to do everything we can to help our young people and their families live out these lessons there. Okay, that's so critical when you look at the span of hours in a week and how much time are they really with you. Even if it's a summer camp program and you have them for that concentrated block of time, still pales in comparison to the amount of time they're with their family. So any ministry to young people must include ministering to the family. Okay, so in the book, The Family Friendly Church, Ben Frudrenberg writes, parents are the primary Christian educators in the church, and the family is the God-ordained institution for building faith in young people and for passing it on from one generation to the next. Over the years, this vision has been lost in our program-centered church culture in which parents find themselves on the sidelines instead of in the game. Okay, I feel like this is really kind of getting at the essence of what we need to be doing, that parents are the primary educators. And so often we give them the message that if you drop your child off for Sunday school, we're going to make your kids good Orthodox Christians. If you bring them to, our youth group program, that's going to keep them in the church. And so this program-centered way of looking at things is really not Orthodox. In the Orthodox Church, we live our faith out in the home, the church of the home. We bring the church home with us. We go to church to get our lessons. We bring it back home. We pray in the home. We do all these things in the home to connect with Christ. He is in our home constantly. And we have to really be mindful of that when we're doing ministry, is that the ultimate goal is not to keep our ministry in the room going really well, but so that it walks out of the room and walks into their homes and into their schools and into the world. So we have to think about how can we do that. I remember years ago when I was a camper at camp, there was this phrase that we always used to call, we used to refer to camp as a place we'd go to recharge our spiritual batteries. Okay. And I really thought that was a great analogy at the time, when I was in high school. Yes, that's right. We go, we recharge our spiritual batteries. We get up, we pray every day, every night. We have this whole rhythm that's beautiful that we can't sustain when we go home and everything. And the idea was that we recharged the batteries and then we went home, and throughout the whole year, that battery drains. And so as I started thinking about this analogy more and more, I thought that really kind of stinks, because God doesn't really just exist at camp. Although many kids have really wonderful, wonderful experiences that bring them closer to God, the battery's not needing recharging at camp. It's at the church. It's in our homes. It's daily through prayer. We shouldn't drain ourselves each year and have to go to camp to get God and everything. And so I recognized that we had a little bit of a broken way of looking at things there. So we have to look at the family and find out how we can include them in these ministries, even if it's a ministry directed at teenagers, even if it's a sleepaway summer camp program. What can we do to include the families in these programs so that the lessons learned are built on in the home, so that the camper can go home and talk about their experience and, and continue to blossom with what they've learned. That's what's really critical as we're partnering with parents in ministry. So there's a really wonderful book I would highly recommend if any of you are interested in reading further. It was a longitudinal study of generations. It's called Faith and Family: How Religion is Passed Down Across Generations by Vern Bingston. And what he kind of looked at was what sustains religious continuity across generations, what causes breaks in that continuity in some families. And it was like a 35-year study over 4 generations of families. They had 3,500 participants, 300 families. So they really got a good handle on this. And they had different different religions and stuff within the study. But it was a really interesting, it's a very interesting read to look at. But one of the things they found is that, and they were actually very surprised about, is that parents really do matter still to their kids. They really do matter, and how they live their lives determines greatly if the faith is retained in the next generation. And I'm just going to go, because literally you could do a whole weekend retreat on this book, but just to touch upon a few of the things that were really compelling in this, is the idea of parents as role models. We all know that parents are role models, and that their kids learn more by watching them than by what they're saying a lot of the time. But what they looked at within that, there were three components. The first one was that how were they role modeling church involvement? That is, were they actually worshiping in church? Okay, were they active in the sacramental life of the church? That wasn't language they used. But were they very active in the church, both in a liturgical way as well as a social way, in that the church life was meaningful to them and not something they were just going through the motions of. That was what some of the quotes were. I see my parents going to church, but I don't think they're really there. They're just kind of something they have to do. I think that's a really important thing for us to try to support, for parents to be involved in the life of the church. And at no point can that be a better time to start that is than with young parents. And an example of that, for example, years ago when I was working at the youth department, we received a call from a young mother who was pretty upset. She had a fairly young baby who she brought to church. And the baby started crying in church, okay? And the mother said that the parish council members, or whoever the attendants were, came up to her and said that she needed to leave the church because the baby was disturbing the worship, okay? And she called the youth department to let us know that she will never set foot in an Orthodox church again. She said that she had kind of converted to marry and married into the faith, and she just thought a church where babies weren't welcome, that she didn't want to be a part of that. So, how could we have done that different? Again, when we talk about youth ministry, that begins when that baby comes into church. And we're ministering to the parents at that point. How different would it have been? Because maybe the baby was screaming bloody murder. Maybe the baby did need to be taken out of church for a little bit, for the baby and for the mom's sake at that point, and then been brought back in. Maybe it was an appropriate time. And I think babies belong in church, even if they make a little bit of noise. But every once in a while, there was this point where my son hit a point where he needed to be walked out of church and kind of calmed down and stuff and everything. Maybe that was at that point. But how different would it have been if, as a church, somebody had walked up to that parent and put their arm around her and said, "Sweetie, we've all been there. Take a deep breath. I know how you feel right now. My son, did the same thing. How about we go for a walk? And then we'll come back in and go out and take that mom outside and walk with her and show her how to be in church with a baby." So, we talk about parents as role models, but sometimes our parents themselves don't know how to participate in the sacramental worship services of the church and the sacramental life of the church. So how are we modeling that in a loving way as a parish community from the time they're very, very young? We often talk about, once we get to the teenage age, well, these parents aren't, coming to church, so why do they expect their kids to, or this and that? But have we really, really reached out to them when their children are very young? Young parents are really in the need of a lot of mentoring and stuff. So this is a really good time to get with them and to get involved with them. Another area about the role modeling that was super important in this study was their home prayer and home instruction, what they called, or ongoing like Bible studies or talking about the faith in the home. That was super important. Home where prayer was a regular thing. The family was praying together. They had individual prayer lives, and they talked about things in the church or read the Bible together, that increased the retention of the faith. So when you think about your youth ministry programs, think about, what can I do to send home something that will increase the home prayer life or get them talking about the faith a little bit more. A few years ago in one of our Hope ministry groups, which was kind of elementary school age kids, we decided to make these Lenten treasure boxes where the kids decorated these treasure boxes with an icon on it. And then they had these little gold medallions. And on the medallion was a different challenge for every day of Great Lent. Sometimes the challenge was, try to do something that you to do a chore around the house, or try to give somebody a compliment that you don't normally talk to too much. Pray for 5 minutes in front of an icon for somebody that you don't get along with very well. Try to sit silently for 5 minutes. There was a whole bunch of different things that kind of stretched the children a little bit in what they might normally do. So this was something that we had kind of sent home with the kids. And halfway through Lent, we had gotten an email from one of the moms and said, I've never really had anything that we've done during Lent, but this has kind of been amazing because my kids get up every morning so super excited to pull out their gold coin to find out what their challenge is of the day. And then at night, we talk about it at dinner. And then we talk more about God and Lent, and we say our prayers together. And she's like, and it was such a simple thing that you sent home, but it's had a profound effect on our family. So even if we sent that home to like 10 families and only one family did it, it was totally worth it. So what we have to constantly think about in our youth ministry is, how are we constantly building on sending things into the home so that the families are being challenged to try to discuss the faith in the home, to try to pray more in the home. So we're actually teaching them how to do more things like that in their home and to be role models in this. And I think the third thing that they talked about is the idea of consistency of word and deed, that you walk the talk. In other words, don't say, church is super important and then stay home and watch football on Sunday, but send your kids to church or stuff like that. And I think sometimes we like to point out those big hypocrisies. But the fact is, I think we have to have more conversations about this, because it's a really hard thing as a parent to be consistent and to always say what you mean, and to be truthful to that. And I know as a parent myself, I kind of mess that up a lot, and trying to really live what our faith is teaching is what I'm doing every day in my life, showing my child that the most important thing in my life is my relationship with God. I'm not sure it is every day. I really want it to be. And I think that's something that with parents, we need to have more open discussions about, okay? We need to have open discussions about, what are we witnessing to the world? If we say that we're Orthodox Christian, what are our actions showing? Is it showing people what a true Orthodox Christian is? And I remember there's a quote from Gandhi. Can't figure out if it's a real quote or not, but the sentiment is there, is the idea that he said, I like your Jesus. And if it weren't for the Christians I met, I too would be a Christian. In other words, are we really witnessing what Christ witnessed to us? Are we witnessing that love of Christ to everyone? Are we going to church and praying and then driving home in the cars and, chatting about people in church? I think that we need to help parents to discuss this, to come together and talk about those struggles, because they are struggles. And I think that when we name those struggles and we realize that other parents are struggling with those too, it's a very helpful thing. And I love this quote from there's a quote from St. John Chrysostom that says, "For generally the children acquire the character of their parents, are formed in the molds of their parents' temperament, love the same things their parents love, talk in the same fashion, and work for the same ends. So most definitely role modeling is important. Our children look up to us, for better and for worse. And we need, as youth workers, to recognize that our goal is not just to reach out to the children, but to reach out to the parents too, and create a way for them to connect and to continue to grow in their faith and parenting in the faith. So the second area of this study kind of looked at is the parent-child relationship quality. Parents that had warm relationships with their children, lower conflict levels, more openness, their children were more likely to stay in the faith. And I think that this is an area that we don't do enough of. We actually did a study years ago where we asked families what they needed more of, and they said they needed more guidance in parenting their children in the faith. And how can we as youth programs kind of come together and say, hey, let's offer some parent nights where we can actually talk about some parenting skills, or offer some parent support groups where they can just get together and discuss some struggles they're having as parents, and coming together regularly as parents, maybe even for fun activities, to try to get parents interacting with each other and with their child as well. So I think those are super important things to do. We kind of just assume that, parents are going to know what they're doing. And I know that I have my degree in child development, and most days I am still struggling to figure out how to be a good parent. And only through the grace of God do I get through that every day. And so I think we have to set up communities where people can come together and talk about the struggles of parenting kids in the faith, talk about, different parenting skills and stuff. And when we get into this area of talking about parent outreach and ministering to parents and parenting groups, as well as support groups for parents and stuff like that, I think it's really important to say, it can be hard to minister to parents if you don't have set ground rules. I think it's very important that you acknowledge when you start working with parents and in a group that's coming together to discuss, especially that, every family is unique and different, and every family is loved and cherished by God. And there are many different ways to be good parents. We don't need to all do it the same, okay? As long as we have Christ as our guide, there can be a million different ways to parent your child, attachment parenting, whatever kind of parenting you choose to do. And I think for a parenting group to be successful, you have to build a healthy respect between parents, even if they wouldn't parent that way themselves. So the other thing is that idea of no judgment, when you come to some sort of parenting group. It doesn't mean we have to agree, but we need to be respectful. Parents are all trying their best every day, and every one of us struggles. So, and the other ground rule is the idea of listening to hear, not to respond. This is something important that we should do in our youth groups as well, is the idea that, we really need to start listening and being fully present with people. So often when we listen to people, we're just thinking in our mind, okay, how am I going to respond to what they're saying? Oh, they're saying this, so I'm going to respond this way. We need to really build good listening skills in these groups so people can kind of enter into the other person's space of what they're sharing and try to have a little empathy towards and compassion towards one another. So, and then also the one ground rule of the idea of what's said in that group stays in that group. That you honor one another by not leaving and saying, well, do you know what somebody said they're struggling with their kid? These are all really important things when you're talking about parenting groups, if you choose to do some as an offshoot of your youth ministry programs, which I highly, highly recommend. And I think also building prayer within that group, of taking time at the end of group to pray for each other's children and families. And if there's any special needs, to hold up to prayer. I think that's an important thing to do within parenting groups and stuff. Now, if we could look a little more, so I've talked specifically about parenting groups as a way to, get parents more involved. That's kind of pulling them out from the young people. But I think there's also ways to include parents within your actual youth ministry programs. And I think that's a really beneficial thing for them and for their children. It doesn't need to be all the time, although I would say the younger the children are, the more important it is. I would say, especially, when you're talking about the preschool groups, there's a lot of the parent-child groups that are going on where, the parent comes with their, toddler, whatever, once a week, and they have like a play group and a little discussion, and they socialize with other parents with their things. There's a lot of parishes doing that. Obviously, that really is a parent-focused ministry as well. We've started just doing our elementary ministry as being completely family-based in how we approach it, because to us it didn't seem to make sense to pull the elementary kids away from their parents at this point. They go to Sunday school separate from their parents, but if the idea is to get the church into the home, what we've done is family education nights, which starts off with like an art project around a certain theme. And it's always some sort of art project that they can take into their home to live out the faith. Like during Lent, we do these huge poster maps of like all the weeks of Lent or something like that, something that they can take up and put up, and they can help them build on their faith in the home and such. But we also, after that, we'll go into the church for a little while and we'll pray, and Father will speak to us. And then we always end with a potluck. So we have this community that we're building, but also with the idea that the education does not stop there. We're just giving you some stuff to take home and do as well. So I think that's really super important for the younger ages. Now, when you get into teenagers, it seems to be a lot of the philosophy is, okay, teenagers need their space. And I would agree with that, to some extent. But I also think it's beneficial to get teenagers together with their parents. We don't do enough things with teenagers and their parents to build like fun camaraderie or something, like having a parent-child kind of night with teenagers where you do, silly interviews where, you ask your parent, what was your favorite, song in high school and why? Or what was your favorite show that you watched and what did you like about it? Or who were your friends in high school? And, why was this important to you? And you can get into more serious discussions too, where, the teenager shares one part of, being a teenager that they struggle with, and the parent shares what they struggled with at that age too. There's a lot of different things you can do. Again, you want to have still time for the teenagers, but again, if once a month or once every few months, you can bring those parents in, that's a super wonderful way to help work on that parent-child relationship in kind of a fun place where everyone's doing it together. And you can have different lectures and discussions, both spiritual and non-spiritual. I think I know of parishes that have hosted nights where they've brought in the local police department to talk about trafficking. And they've had it for both parents and teenagers. And then they've had a discussion afterwards and set up rules with the teenagers, and the parents have talked about, how they can avoid, some of these traps that they've heard about and stuff like that. And then you can have spiritual ones, preparing, for Lent, preparing for there's so many different things that you can do. And so I encourage you not to shy away from bringing parents and teenagers together. I think media, we're so blessed right now to be able to do so many things to share, our stuff. We can send email updates to our parents. We can post things on a Facebook, setting up a Facebook group. We can put things in the general church bulletin and on websites directed towards parents. Sometimes just a quick email. Hey families, this is what we did at Goya tonight at our Greek Orthodox youth group tonight, or our Soya group. This is what we did. Just here's some great questions to ask your teen about what we did. Because sometimes sending those questions can be great, because what happens when you ask your child, so what did you guys do today? Nothing. What'd you learn? Not much. How was it? It was good. just, but if you ask more pointed questions, you can kind of get a little bit more out of them. So just sending out a few things, some articles that supplement what your child has learned for parents to read. Say, this is what your child learned about. Here's an article. We talked about confession. Here's an article about confession if you're interested and stuff, so that you're kind of doing parallel learning with, the young people as well as the parents. So everything that you do, you try to have some component that goes home as well, to elevate the spiritual life in the home. So I think that also in challenging camps a little bit, because they have the kids for a week, trying to do something to send home to the families. And I'm not sure, it's a hard thing to figure out how to do, because you've had these kids for the full weekend. You can't, simulate the camp environment when they get home. But what are some things families can do? Sometimes families don't even really know what's gone on at camp. Could you, when parents pick up their kids, put together a devotional book for the parents and send it home with them after they drop off their kids and say, here's our Monday night, prayers or devotions or our theme. Here's something for you to reflect on as a parent, and know that you're kind of reflecting on similar things that your child's reflecting on this day as well. And it takes them through each of the days. So the parents are kind of going through their own evening reflection on what their child has been learning that day at camp. Or you could even, which could be a lot of fun, set up a webinar like this midweek of camp. You could show like a little video clip of, the kids playing and stuff, but then also talk about, do some sort of workshop for them. The idea of reentry into the home, of what their kids have been experiencing and things that they can do to continue building on that in the home through a webinar. The parents can do that from their home, and you can do it while you're at camp. So those are just a couple of things that you might want to consider doing. So let's see here. I think one thing that can also be really nice to do is, when we think about the Church of the Home, the idea of worship is really, as much as possible, if you can seasonally send things home to the home after youth groups and stuff. Here's some prayers to say during your family prayer time. Here's the Lenten prayer of St. Ephraim. If you and your family can stand before your icon corner and say it together during this Lenten period at night, or add it to your prayers. Now, for some families, they might not have an icon corner. They might not be saying prayers regularly as a family, but maybe this sending it home will get them to at least be saying this prayer and have one icon up that they're praying during that, during this period and stuff. So anytime you can send things like that home, you never know, even if it only touches one family and they start doing something different, it's a blessing. It's a beautiful thing to do. Reminders of them of, hey, there's a video on preparing your family for Lent. Here it is online if you guys want to watch it as a family and prepare for what you're going to do during Lent. Anything you can do to keep pushing things back into the home to figure out, to build up the Church of the Home is really important. And especially around worship, both in the church and home, and encouraging families to come to church together, to pray together regularly, I think is super, super important. And I think sometimes our families aren't really sure. They don't know about all the different services of the church. They're not sure how to be in liturgy or even their role in liturgy. And so any little nugget we can send that sets off a spark that makes them want to grow and learn more is so important. I think another thing that can be nice to do to integrate parents into is the idea of service projects. The idea of challenging them to build charity both inside and out of their home through kindness and through, acts of kindness or whatever they can do. But then also maybe you can sponsor some sort of service projects that parents and children can come and do together. I know a popular one is the IOCC kits and stuffing those and everything, or more hands-on things, which I think is more for older kids, like the Habitat for Humanity or Focus North America. These are all things that we can kind of come together to do. And then always try and build on opportunities to get kids and parents interacting together in fellowship and just having fun together. We're so scheduled these days, like, families don't get to sit down and just have fun, like with some goofy obstacle course or fun things like that. We've forgotten how to do those things. So anything your ministry can do to build and integrate parents into it, I think is really an important thing and will make you a much stronger ministry. I think one of the other things that is really important as I'm getting ready to kind of close up here is that to be there as a constant reminder to parents that that we're working with our children, even from the time they're young, on fostering independence. There's a quote by Khalil Gibran that says, "The love of a parent for a child is the love that should grow towards separation." Because eventually those children are going to be on their own. And we have to support parents in helping their child to become independent and letting their child explore things about the church, so that the church initially, the faith of a child is very much grounded in the faith of the parents. But that needs to separate for the child to have the faith of their own. They need to develop a relationship with Christ on their own for them to continue growing spiritually. And so that, how to do that can be a hard thing, and it can be sometimes a scary thing as the child's exploring, what is this relationship with Christ? When a child comes home and says, "I'm not sure I believe in God anymore," and the parent wants to say, "Well, you will if you live in this house," as opposed to, "Well, tell me more about that. Why don't you believe in God?" Because that conversation can actually lead to that child being a much stronger Christian down the line, as opposed to saying, "Well, no, you're going to definitely believe in God." So I think that, again, back to those ideas of parent support and being able to discuss things like this that are really hard to do, especially as we're trying to hold our children tight, but we know we have to let them go. We know they have to grow up. We know we have to hold them up to God, just as we brought them on their 40 days and we presented them to the temple. We have to continually re-present them to Christ and recognize that He's working in their lives, and loves them more than we ever can. So we have to be there to work with parents to help them to understand that. So one more just cautionary note as I close up here. When you work with more parents and families, you kind of come to a deeper understanding of where that child and family is coming from. And you need to be prepared that you might come up against more challenging social issues that families face. And you need to be prepared to help them find the help that they need when they need it. We live in a world with a lot of different family structures, and we need to make sure that everyone feels welcome in our church. All of our, families, single parent families, step families and stuff. We need to make sure that we're sensitive to all those different families, intermarried families where not everyone in the house is Orthodox. How do they participate in your ministry when not everybody's Orthodox? And to think about those things, but then some that are dealing with some hard issues. And I think that's why it's important to talk with your priest to find out about resources and how he would like you to deal with situations that may or may not come up. And obviously always keeping him in the loop. How should you deal with this situation? Obviously, in serious situations like of abuse, there's obviously that mandated reporting, which I know the youth workers do a lot of information about, getting you guys information about that, and you can get more information from them. But when it's a family that's just struggling with regular family things and they might need a little bit help, how do we deal with that? How do we provide them with that help? How do we have a resource of referrals of social resources that can help them? A family who somebody has lost their job and stuff, what's out there? How can we provide them a help and support and just a loving ear as they're going through these things? So I think those are the main things I want to touch on. Just closing, I think one of the most important things we can do for our youth ministry and our family ministry is to just regularly, have a list of all the kids you're ministering to and families you're ministering to. And every night, every day, just sit down and pray for them, because God will rain down grace on your ministry as you hand it over to him, and he can guide you to lead these young people and their families more fully in the church. So I think that's all I have for you. Forgive my ramblings, and I thank you. I'd be welcome to any questions that you might have. Natalie?
Okay, Melissa, thank you. That's been so wonderful. A lot of great information and suggestions for us to integrate parents into our ministry and support parents with the ministry we're doing. As Melissa just said, we're open to questions. Now, if you're new to Zoom, you can use the Zoom webinar chat function, or you can look at the bottom of your screen and click on the Q&A button and type something into there. And okay, so Melissa, it looks like a question popped up. I think this is an easy one, but it says you mentioned a Lenten treasure box activity that you have utilized.
Hold on, I can't. You're breaking up, Natalie. Can you say that again?
Sure. The question is, you mentioned a Lenten treasure box activity that was successful for you. Is there somewhere where you can get a how-to on how to utilize that in your parish, or where to get the needed materials to do that?
I keep meaning to format it to put it off. To be honest, I adapted it as something from the philosonest.com. She is a wonderful religious education director, or has worked in religious education in the Pittsburgh area, and she has a website with resources. And if you look up her Lenten treasure box, she has that there. I didn't, she has actually where you can fold and build the thing. I bought boxes and just jewels from Michael's and let the kids do whatever. And then I printed out some color icons that they could put on them and stuff, and just let them decorate them how they wanted. And then we made the gold coins. I have to be honest, I wasn't able to find coins. So I got like wooden sticks and spray painted them gold. And then we were able to glue on the different challenges of the day. And what I did with the challenges is I looked at the one she had, and I kind of built on some and added some others. And then I would send home the list with the families and let them cut out the strips and put them on there, because there were things on there like "mi prospero," and I didn't want a mom to be like, I totally can't do that. Just leave that out of your thing. Put something else on instead, or something. We had something like, go to the church today after school and just sit in it for, 5 minutes or 10 minutes and pray quietly. Well, our church is always open. That made sense. And most people live right here. If you live 2 hours from the church, that's not going to be something practical to put in there. So that's kind of how I built that up a little bit. And someday I'll format it a little bit better and get it up on our thing. But that's how you can do. And if you want, maybe we can share my email, our email Center for Family Care, and I can even send you that list of what I formatted. I'd be happy to. So
sure, that would be great. So another question we have is, it says earlier in your talk, you had mentioned, the home is where everything should start, and, having holiness in the home. What's a way that we as youth workers can support families to keep, to make their homes holy?
It's a hard one to answer, and it's something to struggle with. I think one of the ways is just by being there with the families and getting to know who they are and what their life is. Because I think it's hard to go in and say, okay, well, now you have to have your, icon corner, you're this, you're that. as opposed to getting to know a family and, oh, this is your child, welcome to our church, let's get to know you a little bit, and then start to help them integrate some of these things into their home. But I think we have to have more discussions about what that means to be holy, and the idea getting families together to discuss that the church is supposed to be in their home. I think is an important thing, because I think that we live in a world that compartmentalizes everything. This is the time I go to the gym, it's my me time, this is, my work time, this is my this time. And that idea that, that our church time and our spiritual life needs to flow in and between everything that we do, and it needs to be in our home regularly. So I'm kind of coming at of how do we help families be holy? It's just by introducing the church, I think, can be overwhelming sometimes if the church isn't in the home. They don't, they go to church every Sunday, but they're not bringing things back to their home, or they're not living that. To church. Okay, let's work with that and slowly build on that and say, hey, do you guys have any icons in your home, and build from there. Oh, do you know the priest comes and blesses your home from there? So sometimes you results and say, I have to set up this big icon, in station in your home, and you need to be praying morning and evening prayers and everything. And we have to be careful. I find that sometimes Facebook, there's a lot of moms Orthodox groups on there, which are really wonderful for ideas. But I worry sometimes that people look at them and they're like, I'm not doing enough, I need to be doing more. But the fact is, each of our families is at a different place. And that's where the discernment of a spiritual father of what's the right step for your family can be really important. Because I know that I can get totally carried away. And it's a little bit like, the weekend warrior workout person that like goes and runs 20 miles and then the next day can't walk. So I think that we have to, whatever we send home shouldn't be overwhelming. It should seem to be something simple. The tradition, like, this time, like, we're challenging your family. We send this prayer of St. Ephrem home. Try to say it every night as a family. Oh, and if you'd like, why don't you add prostrations in? Here's how you do a prostration, or something like that. So I think you just have to be very balanced in how you do it, because it's very easy to get, sometimes I'm looking at stuff to send home. I'm like, I'll give them this and this and this and this. And it's like too much. Simplify. So yeah, I don't know if that answered or if I need a little more there.
I think you're good.
Okay.
So I have one more question that came in. And it is, have you experienced any youth ministry programs or teams that have sort of successfully integrated parents into their team? And how were they able, and do you know how they might have been able to do that? So not as, I guess the question, if I could paraphrase for them, would be not as much how much were you able to minister to the parents, how much were they able to actually bring them into the ministry itself and be a part of it?
I'm so sorry, Natalie. I'm getting like every other word you're saying. So can you just repeat that again?
Sorry, that's technology, everybody. So the question was, have you experience of any youth ministry programs or ministry teams that have been able to successfully integrate parents like onto the team and be a part of the team in the planning for the ministry itself? And do you have any suggestions for how to get parents involved and integrated in that?
I think there's a lot of like teen programs that have parents involved in the planning, and a lot of times parents are actually can end up being the advisors, which can be a really great thing and stuff, but sometimes it can get stuck on like couple parents not integrating and getting other parents involved and stuff. I think we do a really good job of like latching on to certain people and then not getting other people's involved in smaller things with youth ministry and stuff. I think it's really important, especially in the teenage ministry, that, you know, when you have parents as advisor, which I think is a really wonderful thing, that we have meetings with our advisors and our parents and talk to them about boundaries with their kids in that program, because you want to be able to have that child, when they're having a discussion with a priest or with a youth worker or somebody else about, you know, things in the church or things in teenager life, you want to have them feel comfortable and not think, oh my gosh, my mom is in the corner, I can't discuss this like the other kids are. And stuff. Other kids, I think you have to be really careful and really upfront with the parents about where their boundaries are with that. And then as far as integrating parents into like activities, like having like a parents' night or a discussion group with the teens and the parents about certain things, I think that's a fairly new thing. I know there are parishes out there doing it. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but they're starting to do that more and more. I actually had somebody say to me once, there's no point in doing that because teens don't like to talk to their parents. And I was like, I'm sorry, but that's not a good enough reason, because we need to be fostering relationships between parents and children, and not be creating, you know, just, oh, they can only talk to their youth worker, because we want to be on the same team. Our parents want to know that their youth workers are, you know, supporting them, and the youth workers want to know that the parents are going home and reinforcing the lesson. So I think whatever we can do to integrate, and for those that aren't involved, I think we have to, again, start small, like asking to come for a meeting or something, but we're going to have this one thing and it's going to be really great, and can you come for this? You know, I think that's the important thing, and to set realistic goals. I think recently, one of the struggles in talking with one parish that they faced with developing family ministry is the idea of, how do you minister to people that don't sometimes there's families that don't recognize that they need ministry. They don't recognize the need for the church of the home. And that's a real struggle sometimes. And all you can do, family ministry is a lot harder because you've got multi-age things going on. You're getting parents involved. There's just a bunch of dynamics that go into it. And you just kind of have to keep redirecting, keep praying, and just keep trying to figure out what works for your families, because it can be very hard when, you know, their whole life they didn't realize that they're supposed to be living out their faith in the home, and we start sending things home, saying, hey, why don't you guys try this? And it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to go to Goya. You're not bring Goya home and stuff, or, you know, such like that. So yeah. Is there another question?
Yeah, we do. So Melissa, this question is, I'm attending tonight as a volunteer who is not a parent. What are some recommendations you have for us to ensure that we don't come off as stepping on their toes, respecting their families, etc.? Are there topics or activities that you think are reserved for parents rather than for volunteers, or vice versa?
I think that one of the most successful things you can do, you know, for not stepping on toes, is to kind of put together a meeting at the beginning of the year with youth workers and parents, and to explain the goals of your ministry and where you would like the parents to be involved, and where you welcome their input and how you're going to be communicating with them, and then actually soliciting their input. I think that's really important. We don't do that enough. What are some of the real concerns that you have as parents for your teenagers? Because I think when you throw that out there at the beginning of the year to parents, I think you're going to get a flood of responses. Parents have a lot of concerns about their kids and them getting involved in different things and stuff. So I think by just opening up your ministry year, by sitting down with the parents and talking with them and just listening actually to them about what they would like to see of this ministry, and then talking a little bit about where you'd like to take it and how they can be more involved. Um,
Are you still there with us, Melissa?
yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a couple seconds.
Okay. Okay. You know, and there was one thing that I also did want to share. As you're looking at parish ministry, I would encourage you to come to the Center for Family Care's website where I work, of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, and that's family.goarch.org. And we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of webinars with different experts on different topics in family life that can be really nice for your parenting programs. You can take pieces of them and discuss them, and the idea of bringing these experts into your parish without having to fly people out was part of the purpose for it. So that's some of the things that we have, and we always have more additional stuff. If you're looking for something you can't quite find it, you know, always give us a call or send us an email, and we'll be happy to look further for it for you.
Well, Melissa, that was a wonderful segue, because I had a question for you next, which is your the office for the Center for Family Care does such wonderful work. What do you have kind of in your pipeline right now that you're working on, in addition to what you already offer?
Well, right now we've got a lot of different things going on. We have some things for marriage ministry, which actually can be another fun thing. I heard of a parish once having their teen group plan a Valentine's dinner night for their parents and stuff, which was really sweet, and everything. They just did this whole thing and gave their parents kind of the night off, which was sweet. One that you have to be careful with as an activity, because if you have single parent families, that could be, you know, they could feel a little alienated with that. But anyway, so we have webinars. We have some different things for marriage ministry. This program called Becoming One, which is just a simple thing on our Facebook page. It's just like one reflection. You read it with your spouse and you discuss it. And it comes out like every couple weeks. Not something overwhelming, something simple that you can do every 2 weeks with your spouse to kind of enrich your marriage and focus on what our marriage as Orthodox Christians mean in the church. So that's one thing that we're continuing to develop. We have a really great program. We kind of launched it last year and had a lot of success, and we're kind of doing an additional component. This year it's called Soak Up the Sun, S-O-N. And the idea that in the summer, we want families to kind of commit to having a summer soaking up Christ and including him in all their summer plans. So each week there's a challenge. There's some prayers that they can do each week. There's an activity, and then there's something they can reflect on as a family to really kind of about a certain theme or something. Last year, we really followed the ecclesiastical year, you know, things around Pentecost and, you know, the Dormition and stuff, and we tried to stick with that and explore some of the you know, the most basic components of our faith, fasting, different, you know, communion, all those different things. And so those actually will be up. Last year's will be up as well. And then this year we're doing an additional component, which is Orthodoxy in the World, where we're actually going to have interviews like throughout the world of Orthodoxy in different countries, like hopefully, you know, Japan, Kenya. We've got some different people. We're still pulling all the pieces together. And we hope to make it really fun where, you know, you get to meet whoever this person is there. They can tell you about Orthodoxy in their country. You get to learn how to say, Lord have mercy in their language and pray for something specific that they want you to pray with. But we might also throw some recipes from that country in there and some sort of art project that you can do as well to kind of engage with the culture a little bit. And then we're going to also have another video that they do of taking you to some site of significance for the church and everything to take a tour of. So that's what we're really working a lot of our energy on right now. We're really excited about. So those are some of the things that we've got right now. Our webinar series, like we said, we have them all upline. We have kind of taken a little break from creating new ones, and we're going to be starting up with those again. So we always welcome input or things or people that you'd like to hear. Yeah. So.
And Melissa,
oh, and one more thing. I almost forgot. Our director, yes? Oh, our director, Father Alexander Gusettis, he has a podcast through Ancient Faith Radio called Family Matters, and he's done some wonderful interviews on the scope of family life, from, dealing with aging parents and palliative care, to early childhood and all sorts of different issues. So I definitely, encourage you all to check that out. It's a wonderful resource.
Yeah, and I think one of the suggestions you had about offering things to parents is one of the best ways we can support them. And I think all of the things you're working on, you've already produced, it's a great way for us as youth workers to just casually share that with parents and families and say, hey, this is something I've heard about. I know it's wonderful. You might be interested in checking it out. And, I think sometimes just, giving that offering to parents and, saying this is something that we think is great, you might like it, they'll click that button and check it out. So I think that's a good thing for us to keep in mind as well. Sometimes it's just the easy thing of passing on the information once we find out about it. So I don't see any more questions in the queue there, Melissa. So I want to thank you on behalf of the Orthodox Youth Directors in North America. We have a very long title, all of us, but we're very grateful that you did this. This is our second webinar, and that you joined us in this endeavor. And we're very thankful and grateful, not only that you joined us into this first, but in the work that you are creating with the office there with Father Alexander. And we hope to have a long connection of working with you. Father Alexander just served as the keynote speaker for the Youth Worker and Camping Conference that we hosted just a few weeks ago in Atlanta, Georgia. And you can see his keynote address right now on our Facebook page, which is Orthodox Youth Directors in North America, along with all of the other presenters from the conference. So please, thank you to you, and extend my thanks to Father Alexander as well for all of the support you've given us, and hopefully that we can give you working hand in hand in parent youth ministry moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all of you for coming and joining Melissa and I tonight. As I mentioned earlier in tonight's webinar, the Orthodox Youth Directors in North America is a working committee of the heads of the jurisdictional youth and young adult departments under the Assembly of Bishops. The webinars are one of our newer offerings. As I just mentioned, the Orthodox Youth Worker and Camping Conference, which takes place at the end of every January, has been our longest running endeavor. We've been doing it now for 17 years. We have also our website, orthodoxyouth.net, which is a huge resource hub for you in your ministry, and we hope to have that grow. And we also have the Orthodox Camp Association, and you can find that at orthodoxcamps.org, and it's also a resource hub for those of you that do camping ministry. So thank you from us. Let us know what you need from in your ministry, and we'll do our best to help you with that. When you should get an email tomorrow, sort of following up on this evening's webinar, and we hope that you can fill out the evaluation and let your fellow youth workers or clergy know about tonight's wonderful webinar with Melissa. We'll have it posted on our website, hopefully within the next couple weeks. So I think that's it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. And we hope that you have a blessed Lenten period on your journey to Pascha. Thank you. Good night.